In this video, we're going to be talking to Josh Olin, who's been featured in Forbes magazine and the Joe Rogan podcast.
We get into all things FTX, SBF, crypto, Josh's latest project, Rug Radar, and of course, life after cancellation. Well, hey everyone, this is still the Raisin Bread podcast with Baz and Ben, and today's guest, we have Josh Olin with us, who is now... The trouble is, Josh, I have spent today catching up on your notoriety in the public eye, a lot of which comes from 2015. So
Yes.
Is it still correct to call you a video game developer?
It is not. I'm much
It's
more.
not. Okay, so this is
blockchain.
Josh Olin, not the video game developer.
The not video game developer, the formerly known as video game developer.
Yes.
I mean,
So how would you
known
categorize yourself now?
Yeah.
I'm much more known as a Web3 blockchain developer. I build protocols in the crypto world, in the DeFi world, decentralized finance world, specifically aimed at minimizing the damage that's being done to consumers via fraud and scams. I'm trying to bolster consumer protectionism in the DeFi world.
Nice. Yeah. And that's a big reason as to why I invited actually Josh onto the podcast. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm super into crypto. That's why my Twitter handle is #HalfWorkAndHodl. Bitcoin is my thing. But like Josh, I do have like I have an interest in these sorts of problems, right, which are currently facing Web3. And we're interviewing Josh on this auspicious day where Mr. Sam, Mr. SBF himself, was finally caught and arrested in the Bahamas. So I think it's a good day to talk to you about sort of the stuff that undergirds a lot of this. One of the members of our staff actually had their money in FTX. So
No kidding.
Yeah, and lost. Yeah,
I didn't. Go on.
Yeah,
I was.
Well, I didn't want to reveal you. That's why. So like,
no, look, that's
Someone from our
more
staff.
Than happy. I'm more than happy to talk about it because I'm sure that I'm sure that I'll not be the only one in either the production of this podcast or the audience of this podcast who's in the same kind of story. Now, I didn't lose, let's say, a life-altering amount of money. Thank God. I lost. It was a significant amount, and it's so strange. And this is why, even from my point of view, as something of a crypto novice, this feels very fortuitous being able to speak to someone of your stature, Josh, particularly on a day like today.
Just a little bit too late, huh?
Yeah, it's like, well, it's interesting because the questions that like my friends have had have all been things like, like, oh, why didn't you do this, or this? And it's like, because I wasn't anticipating an exchange to collapse. I put my money on an exchange to buy some crypto because I'd done it before on other exchanges. So I just thought it was yet another exchange. Like now that's all quite different. You win or you learn, as they say, and this was definitely one where I learned. But like, that's something that to definitely get into, like how monumental was my oversight. That's something that I'd definitely like to talk about in this episode.
But before we get into that, I think
sure.
it'd be important to get into what Josh is actually working on and what exactly he's doing. So take it away.
Well, sure. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. Your screen froze. That's all. I talk about doing being in consumer protection, and there's a lot of people out there who are blockchain sleuths, detectives who like to go on Etherscan, like to go on these block explorers and try to track down wallets, track down funds, see who the bad actors are in the crypto world. And that's all well and good, but at best, what you're looking to do there, what your aim is to recover funds. It's to trace somebody to a Binance exchange or Coinbase exchange, someplace that has a KYC or AML protocol where they have to, have an identity matched to the account, and then hopefully one day have some sort of remediation, some sort of damages collected by having a legal apparatus that subpoenas those records and goes after it, and either you do a civil action or there's a criminal action. All of that is to my mind fine if you want to do it, but it doesn't solve the problem because it's already done. The crime's been committed, the damage has been done, the money, the fraudulent money, the illicit gain money has been extracted from the ecosystem, and it's hurt the ecosystem, and it's hurt the reputation, and it's all bad news. So I've wanted to front run that. My focus has always been to create a technology, a layer to innovate on the blockchain with these blockchain tools in a way that prevents this from happening in the first place. So preventative measures have always been my focus. So that's what I did with the GTFO ecosystem and protocol, which stands for Get the Fraud Out. And then also now the current product that we're in beta right now and about to launch, which is Rug Radar. And Rug Radar detects rug pulls before they even list. So it's a early warning system for rugs, and rug pulling being, having them steal your liquidity.
8% of Americans, only 8% of Americans look favorably upon crypto.
Yes, that was a recent stat that I read on the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, but I believe it is reputable. It would make sense that we're at an all-time low, right? Look, we're at the bottom of a pretty severe bear market. Absolute capitulation has got to be in or very near. And look, and I can confirm this on chain, which is the amount of volume that we're seeing. The volume is unbelievably low. So there's just there's not a lot of faith in the market right now. So this damage is the result of unmitigated, unfettered access and operation of fraud. So there's no reason why we can't fix this. The only reason why is because if you think about the curve of consumer adoption, right? It's the bell curve, right? You start with your innovators, then you have your early adopters, then you have, and by the way, the innovators and early adopters, these are the people who pay $8,000 for a 20-inch flat screen TV, back when the technology is brand new, right? They're generally speaking, they're the more affluent of us, right? They're the ones who can afford that, and then over time, you use that money. The manufacturers use that money to innovate to bring down that price, so it can have massive scale. Well, we're kind of there with crypto right now, right? This is that part of the early adoption, and so also it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best operators. We have the sort of the hackers, the tinkerers, the risk takers. We have the ones on the fringe who are developing these things. Great engineers, perhaps, right? Genius engineers at times, but not necessarily people who have a very extensive experience productizing those ideas. And building products, making them into products is very challenging. So a lot of times we see products that aren't that great or have a lot of problems. So the reason why we haven't seen this yet is partly because of that, and partly because it's just there's no barrier to entry. There's no gatekeepers, so anybody can come in and launch a smart contract, and this means that people with low moral character can create businesses around just scamming people, just taking this freedom of and this access to this amazing technology, and instead of using it for good, for building constructive things, they just do the same thing that the central finance banks have been doing to us the whole time, which is just robbing us. So we can innovate. Nobody has.
It's funny that you say that. Pardon me. It's funny that you say that, Josh, because I had this conversation with Ben the other day. I told him that they're just doing what the banks would do if there were no law, right? Where there was no, like, if the banks were allowed to run free.
Yeah, take
like this weird.
Well, yeah, take 900 to 1, leverage, or 900 to 1 fractional reserve against their deposits, things like this. Yeah, and that's what we saw people like FTX doing, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Alameda. It's a really interesting, and I think it's a good project. I think it's a noble project. I'm curious, me personally, as to how it works, because and obviously there's some things that you can kind of reveal and some things that you can't. But for we have all types of listeners. I'm a software engineer. I'm curious as to what, at least from a high level, what's actually done. Because what it sounds like to me is that there might be some tech involved, but also there's still a little bit of sleuthing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that's fair to say. If you want, I don't know if
Okay.
sharing screens is going to work. I'm almost tempted to not do anything because I don't want to like cause a system to explode again. But I'm happy to walk you through some of it if I can manage to share my screen.
If you want to, yeah, man. Here, give me just
Yeah, let's give it a go. Yeah.
All right. So
there should be a start screen.
yeah, I think I can hit this button right here. But in short, what I'll say is the way that it works is it takes I guess the traditional what you could call the traditional best practice or standard of taking scanning contracts, scanning actual like Solidity code in an attempt to identify some sort of malicious code, some snippet that's not going to be very nice to people. That's going to be doing something something illicit or some sort of sabotage, and it's taking that and that method of security and flipping it on its head. So instead of scanning the contract code itself, it's worrying about where the money is going. It's focusing on the ledgers. So one of the things about blockchains is there's these public immutable ledgers. So working just from memory, of course, since I built this thing, the way that RugRadar works is we're not worrying about any of the contract code, which actually helps us to be very expandable in the future. Like we're going to be able to interoperability into other chains is going to be just super a breeze, because what we're focused on is where the money's going. It doesn't matter what contracts are doing what, if they have this weird trapdoor function, if they can mint, if they can burn, if they can do this or that, if they can remove liquidity. What matters is where did the money go? Did fund A go here? Fund B went there. And that movement is going to inform whether or not some sort of a fraudulent thing happened. I mean, if they're trying to launder the money, if they've pulled, how much they pulled out relative to how much that they've put in, is this what is it called, undue gains or undue rewards or something like this. So that's what RugRadar does. Is instead of looking at the technical contract code itself, trying to decompile that and reverse engineer it, we just look at the ledgers. So as soon as a new token is written to the blockchain, we can detect that event. We operate a node like anyone else. And as soon as that happens, we start scanning that contract's transaction history and also the transaction history of the deployer. And if you think about the two goalposts of when the contract is created and when the token trading goes live, if you think about those two different goalposts, those two different events, there's a series of transactions that happen in between. And those transactions in between are what we can look at and identify and create patterns in which we know are setups for fraud, are setups for some sort of a rug pull, some sort of a scam. And so we're able to actually alert you about this impending scam before the token trading begins, just based on this vector of known transactional patterns that are indicating that there's something up with this particular deployer. So that's how RugRadar works. It's all completely automated, and we scan for every single token that deploys this way. So we're able to just, if you go to beta.rugradar.org right now, or depending when this airs, rugradar.org, you'll see we list every token that we detect is going to commit some sort of a fraud, and we do that before it's even possible for a consumer to buy it. So it's this early warning system, early avoidance system. And obviously, the ideal implementation of this technology isn't to just operate our own listing site that lists this, the sus-looking tokens. It would actually be to have it at the point of purchase. So have some sort of an alarm or indicator baked into a wallet or baked into a DEX screener or something like this.
So use me as the manifestation of the uninformed masses. Because you've said that this can be used to preempt. During that technical explanation, it sounded to me like when you talked about how it's identifying where transactions are going, where if Fund A is going over here and Fund B is going over there. That to me seems like when I hear that in my head, it feels like someone has to be the guinea pig so how does that work without anyone purchasing that token, without anyone doing anything with that token?
So the funding that scanning, excuse me, that scanning, those transactions are the deployer himself setting things up, configuring the token to do certain things. And so that's
okay.
by seeing how they're configuring it, that tells us, are they attempting a serious attempt here? Based on our historical research, we're able to look at rug pulls of the past and identify what the common patterns are for fraud, and then we're able to look at tokens that are real projects, and we're able to look at, okay, what are the typical transactions we see to configure a real project? And when there's a very stark difference between the two, we can indicate that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
And then what then? And I don't just want to make this about FTX for obvious personal reasons, but like, because that to me is like that was an exchange where, like, the transactions themselves, like, yes, we had things going on with the idea of people buying Bitcoin that didn't actually exist, but Rug Radar, would that have been able to preempt something on the scale of FTX?
Rug Radar, as it's configured, no, but
Okay.
our technology, yes. So
Wow. Okay.
we would have been able to detect Luna before it happened, and we probably would have detected Luna.
Yeah, Luna, I could see you guys. Yeah, from what I understand, because I've like just real quick. I've looked at the technical staff, the technical stack, and Luna seems like a perfect case study for what you're working on.
Luna, we would have caught probably weeks before it happened, because what we would have caught was all of the embezzlement that Do Kwon was doing, the billions of dollars worth of tokens that he was moving. We look at transactional anomalies. So if you think about statistics, there's a standard distribution of expected numbers, and it's a bell curve again. And when things fall outside of that, there's a reason. And when things fall consistently outside of that, there's a pattern. This is the stuff that our technology automatically detects, as long as we're configured to look that way and look at that thing. Right now, we're listening for new token deployments to make sure we can help people avoid getting rugged. But if we were watching everything at all times, which one day we can with scale, we would detect even that. We would have detected Celsius. We would have detected the anomalous deposits coming from the same place, Celsius's hot wallet, down into the DeFi protocols like Compound, where they were doing a lot of leverage lending and borrowing. And we would have, detected FTX. What we would have detected there is we would have detected over time these consistent withdrawals that were coming out of the FTX hot wallets by Alameda. It would have been, and going to the same places and doing the same things, and going to liquidate through Binance. A lot of what this was about was, and this is why I think SBF tweeted out, "Okay, you won this time. You got me." He said that to CZ. It's because it seems like this sort of war has been waging for a while. That what SBF's been doing.
Wait. Let's back up, because we're kind of covering a lot of material here. Let's for people who live under a rock, who is SBF? What is his deal, and what exactly is this feud that he has with CZ, and who's CZ?
Sure. So CZ is he's the CEO of Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in crypto, and SBF stands for Sam Bankman-Fried, or Scam Bank Fraud, Bank Run Fraud. And he's the CEO and founder of FTX, the exchange that just imploded and absconded with tens of billions of dollars of people's money. And so this was now these two were top leaders in a lot of ways, seen as top leaders in the cryptocurrency industry, because of the positions they held and because of the amount of money that they commanded and controlled. And now there's this.
Sam was on the front of the cover. Wasn't he on the cover of, was it Fortune or
Business Week or
what was he on?
What?
Yeah, something. Yeah, he was considered. He was called the Warren Buffett of crypto. Like this guy was a big deal.
Well, I guess he was the youngest billionaire
So
of all time.
Right.
yes, 27 years old. Yeah, something like that.
So
yeah.
at any rate, he he's quite the crook, and it turns out. And so the two of them had been like, I guess, and CZ, by the way, had a big position in FTX. He had invested early and also pulled out early. So
Yep.
he kind of liquidated early, and that in some way may have like hurt SBF in some way. But what I can tell you is just from the ledgers is a consistent theme here was money being money meaning any number of actual liquid crypto coins leaving FTX, moving over to Binance, and then liquidating through Binance. So meaning converting, presumably converting to fiat. So this would come off of this would hurt the balance sheet of Binance, an actual fiat, the thing that matters, and then they would take that fiat, deposit it back into FTX, buy more crypto through FTX, and have the cycle continue. So there's this sort of like arbitrage game of tokens leaving FTX, depositing onto Binance, oftentimes just Tether, just USDC, stable coins, and then never coming back.
Wow.
Right?
Just and so he's using stable coins. That's
Waging
that's
war.
pretty dastardly. No wonder. Yet, no wonder. I mean, that it makes sense now why CZ had such a declared this fatwa against him, because that's pretty sleazy. That is very sleazy. I mean, I'm not a fan of me personally. I mean, I don't really trust any of these guys. CZ got. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the rumblings with CZ and the money laundering stuff, but the sort of ever I don't know what you'd call that. I guess a perpetual motion machine of just money,
revolving door
right?
of money.
And it's all smoke and mirrors, and it's what scares me about stable coins. But I mean, stable coins could be a whole other podcast, to be honest with you. But it's kind of what terrifies me a lot about this stuff is the guys who are willing to kind of who are. I mean, these people are really smart, right? I mean, Sam went to MIT. CZ is intelligent in his own right, but a lot of the fraudsters, besides Sam, because Sam is, I think, one of many.
Yeah.
These are not your average criminals. These are like Ivy League elite.
They're not dumb guys.
Right, and that's what I think is really, really kind of fascinating about it. And what fascinates me about it as well is like the human element. Like, imagine you were 27 years old and you were declared the youngest billionaire in the history of humans. Like, wouldn't at that point you think, hey, maybe that's enough? Like, I think I'm good, right? But you wanted more. Like, what is that about? Like, what do you think? Like, what on a human level is going on there? What do you think? I'm just curious. Like,
you're thinking like a human, a normal human with a well-adjusted brain, a balanced sort of. You're thinking like a balanced, normal person, an average person. But the thing is, and I this is a recurring theme. Me sitting whenever I sit across from one of these guys, there's something about these. I don't know, sociopathic or antisocial, but clearly just raging narcissists have this thing fueling them that it's not so much about, it becomes not about the money as much as it does about the thrill of it all, like the deception, what it is that you're doing. Like SBF, I don't know if you knew this, but one of the things he did was he wanted to donate, he wanted to help. Well, he wanted to get money to the Democratic Party. There's a lot's going to come out about the favor he was getting with Democrats, but he didn't want to be so obvious as to only donate to Democratic candidates. So what he did was he donated an equal amount to Republicans and Democrats, but the Republican candidates that he donated to were candidates that were clearly never going to win. They were in last place. That the money donated to them wouldn't go anywhere, right? But the Democrats that he donated to were people who really needed it, who were in close races. Very clever, right? So this is the level he's working.
It's got to suck to be those Republican candidates, knowing that you would just damage control for SBF.
Yes.
All you are is collateral for him. You're not a politician.
What a scoundrel!
Wow.
But it's clever. Yeah, go on.
And it must have filled him with glee, right? To have gotten away with that, right?
Right.
To see the narratives unfold the way that he wanted to see, that people were tricked, and it wasn't until now that it got uncovered and found out. So and him going on all of these interviews and podcasts and stuff, doing this PR tour, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. You're on one hand, you're probably trying to
PR tour about. But this is the part that upsets me. A PR tour about preventing fraud, about preventing you don't know this. I don't know if you know this, Ben. I don't know if you heard this across the pond, but he was at the forefront of the initial sort of meetings and discussions in Congress for crypto regulation.
Well, yeah, but why wouldn't he? You'd want if you're him, if you're like, because my question is, and this,
of course,
it's like my question is, and to the floor really, rather than an actual specific question that I'm seeking an answer for here and now. Does it start malevolent? Like, to me, I would like to think no. I would like to think no, it doesn't start malevolent. I'd like to think because even the way you described it just then, Josh, is like, because for example, you said it stops being about the money, which implies that at one stage it was at one stage it was crypto, and it was let's create a big company, new tech, novelty. We're early adopters. We've got a big opportunity here, and then slowly but surely over time, he goes, "Oh my God, I've got this much power to wield around. What happens if I do this?"
Right.
And then he gets away with it. And then what happens if I do that? And then he gets away with it. And it's like and then it kind of snowballs. But it's like, yeah, if you're him, you would absolutely, like, oh my God, I run the biggest crypto or up there with the biggest crypto exchanges in the world, and I can sit at the table to discuss regulation. I can perfect. I'll bring the picket fences.
Yeah, $1 billion is such a big number. I mean, people don't understand how big $1 billion is, and how much bigger it is than $1 million. And so, what's the difference between $600 million and $900 million? Once you have that, it's nothing. So, the journey between the two isn't about the money anymore. It's about something else, obviously. And so, and especially once you're north of $1 billion, it's like, what are you doing? What's the purpose of taking this risk? It can't be about money anymore. It has to be about something else, and that's when it does become it. So to answer your question, does it start malevolent? Not that malevolent, surely. Like the way it all starts,
right.
He clearly.
That's a very poignant way of putting it. That's a very poignant way of putting it, because it's like the seed is. Yeah, the seed must be there. That's a very, very good way of putting it. It's like, not that.
But he still knows at the beginning that this is a Ponzi. He still knows at the beginning that he can't have these yield farms yielding out 40% returns from nothing, doing nothing else, just through the finance of it. He knows that there's the whole point of crypto. It's his nth cycle. It's his seventh cycle. However many cycles he's been in it, he knows that it's all about exiting through the liquidity of entering people who are entering too far at the top, and so. There's absolutely an immorality to that from the jump, but it's a little bit different than. Yes, it escalates throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
So what got you into this, man? Because I've been lucky enough, I've been singing your songs to Ben for a couple of weeks now. You're a real interesting guy to me. You've had all these types of experiences. I think, were you featured in Fortune recently? Was it Business Insider? You've been featured
Forbes.
in a lot, right? A couple of just featured in Forbes. You're doing the work. What exactly inspired you to focus on this specifically? Were you someone who was did someone rug pull you, or what's your Batman origin story? Who shot your parents is basically what I'm getting at. If your parents,
a guy named Russ Davis. No, but basically, I got rugged. It was a rug pull, and anybody who gets rugged the first time, you realize you go through this interesting thing of emotions because it's not just that you got scammed or lost some money. It's like I got, but also then like you go to your friend, you're like, well, what do I do? Who do I call? Nobody. You just move on. They win, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like they get to win.
Yeah.
That like that's a
Yeah.
it's a extra
Yeah.
sour pill to swallow. That there's no recourse whatsoever. That there's nobody to call. It's DeFi. It's decentralized. There's no central authority that gets to own it or try to be accountable to it. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, we saw that with Kim Kardashian. We saw that with Floyd Mayweather. Like these people, and even when they did get fined, it's interesting. Like I paid pretty close attention to the Kardashian case. She's fined $1 million. She made way more than $1 million.
yeah, I think she.
Off of
I
that.
think it was just a standard settlement type thing, right? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
her involvement, she didn't know it was going to be that kind of a scam. Like she knew she was promoting it. Like she and Floyd,
Sure.
I think they took their money in fiat. They took their payment. So there's $250,000 in fiat just to promote
true.
it. So it's not like they were pumping and dumping with coins the way that a lot of these YouTubers do.
Sure.
So like, yeah. So they're in like
Gotcha.
a weird exception case, but the people behind it were using their promotion specifically to help with the pump portion of the dump, and then the ones behind the actual coin itself were the ones doing all the dumping on their behalf, like for them.
Let me get your thoughts on that, because I have a beef with the YouTube crypto folks. Like, I think there's some people who have a great personality. Like, I would hang out with Crypto. He seems like a lot, but I'm used to Germans, and an energetic German is so novel to me. Right, the novelty alone would be enough for me to be like, oh wow, you're pretty hyped for a German. Do you know? Are you aware of your history? So, but like the rest of these guys, man, especially as someone who's got into trading and who got into it pretty deep, and started understanding it to a deeper level, and over the years. I mean, sometimes I'd watch their videos, man, and I would just be furious. I would just be. I had to stop watching them at a certain point because of it. Not only it's not just the trading, tips, quote unquote, on tips that they're giving people. It's what they're shilling out, right? And it seems like, who was that guy who went to look for SBF? The frick was his name?
BitBoy.
He's the worst of them. Oh, BitBoy, yeah. Like out of all the people,
fill me in on that.
He's
Again,
reinventing himself right now as
the
like the sheriff,
masses.
right? As like the good guy of crypto, the cop.
And I've watched this
Audacity.
dude for years.
Wait, back up. So who's fit?
Sorry,
BitBoy. Oh, sorry, BitBoy.
He's definitely not fit.
BitBoy.
And he's definitely not fit. You said fit boy, and I'm offended
BitBoy.
by that.
Sorry, BitBoy.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
BitBoy.
I mean, BitBoy. In my mind, I'm picturing Incrediboy, but wearing Bitcoin rather than an eye, like wearing a Bitcoin logo rather than the little Mr. Incredible's eye.
No. We're talking about BitBoy. Sorry, BitBoy. So BitBoy is BitBoy is this guy, YouTuber.
I'm detecting some vitriol here, Josh.
Well, no, I don't even know the guy.
It's
I
a
don't have any
3 for 3.
interaction with him, but he's one of the more like egregious, like one of the more shameless like shillers. So it's the manner in which you're promoting crypto as well, because there are some YouTubers who genuinely will do research, genuinely will support a crypto, won't pump and dump it. Like they're doing the analysis, and they're trying 100%. To share with you a lead, and that's different than what BitBoy was doing for years, which is just oftentimes taking what he knows is going to be a pump and dump, like knows is going to be a scam, because he specifically wants to be a part of that. And he knows that they're going to look the other way, right? That they won't raise an issue. If he takes a real project and does a dump scheme on it, that real project will make a bunch of noise, right? So he's not incentivized to take real projects and do this scheme like some of these other YouTubers are incentivized, because he's planning to dump it and make profit through it. He almost like it needs to find these sketchy coins. So what he'll do for years is take these tokens that had no utility, that had no product, had no technology, that were just white papers, and were just basically vapor coins, shell coins that were just speculating, and he would just call them the future. Oh, this is the future of DeFi, guys. Oh, it's going to change the world. It's going to revolutionize this, that, and the other. And then hype it up. And then as people bought in, millions of dollars in volume the first day or whatever it's going to be, he would be the one dumping into that volume and just cashing out to the tune of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars himself. And then the coin would just crater. And he wouldn't be held accountable for it. He'd oftentimes even delete the promotions, right? Delete the tweets where he was promoting it, delete the YouTube video. That's predatory. I mean, that's just straight up scumbag shit right there, right?
Yep. And his attempt at sort of
whitewash history.
Kind of, yeah, I mean, it's for me, man. It's really it's so upsetting. Like it's because the way MM works is he'll make a mistake, and he's shelling for FTX as well. I'm not sure what he to what extent he was aware with what was going on, but again, I don't trust any of these guys. I'm fairly sure they know a lot of what's going on. He just won't admit mistakes. But that to me is also like, I mean, for every Benjamin Cohen, and shout out to Ben. Benjamin Cohen's an amazing crypto analyst. I had a chance to speak with him before. For every Ben Cohen, there's 50 BitBoys, right? At least. And the thing that hurts is that they're taking people who don't realize that they are being positioned against some of literal PhDs, right, in mathematics, and they're being set up to basically feed them. And I don't know, man. I just it fills me with a lot of despair. I don't know what to do. So that's why but that's why projects like yours are important, right? Because I think to the man on the omnibus or the man on the street, this is necessary. Because to the average consumer, I mean, like, how the hell, like, how are you supposed to know, what white paper you're supposed to read, or what sort of nonsense? I mean, I don't know if you've ever read some of the white papers for some of these projects, but man, sometimes even for someone like me, just indiscernible, it's just impossible to figure out. So
sometimes the more,
yeah, I mean,
sorry to cut you off, but sometimes the more technical the white paper sounds, the easier it is to hide like bullshittery inside of it, right? Because it just confuses people. So they'll skim past that part and just go, oh, well, somebody else has read it, and if it was bad, they would have called it out. So nobody called it out. I'm sure it's fine. You see what I'm saying? Like there's like, what happens when the power goes out at your house, right? I don't know about you guys, but I sit there and I go, I bet there's somebody working on this right now. And I just wait. Somebody's working on this for sure. I don't call anybody. I just sort of wait. And then the power comes back on. But like, what happens when nobody's calling? What happens when there's nobody working on it? And how long would you wait before you had to went and tried to solve the problem yourself? Well, this white paper stuff, this DYOR culture, it's like anytime you encounter a little thing that you don't know how to really interpret, you just go, well, they published it, and there are people out there who know, so I'm sure someone would have called it out if it was a problem, so I'll just skip over it. That's what people do so easily in their head. They don't even think that they realize they're doing it, but they get to a part that they don't know how to confirm, and they just move past it, assuming that, oh, well, they wouldn't have even wrote that if it was going to be bullshit because someone was going to catch them. You know what I mean? So it's...
Well, the other thing is, it's one of those things. It's very easy to do in retrospect. It's very easy to say in retrospect. It's like when you have a car accident or something, and people go like, "Oh, why don't you do this evasive action? Why don't you take that?" And it's like, it's absolutely, of course, yeah. Why? Like, this is where I say that I am the voice of the uninformed, is because I got stung in real time. But I do feel like, for example, my interest in crypto has shot up since, because I now want to understand it more.
Okay.
And I now have more of an active interest in it, and I am even more enthused by it, I would say, because I've looked in the preliminary kind of awakening that I've had in light of losing money. I'm now like, oh no, I really do see the potential of this, and I really want to be involved, and I really think it could benefit me in the long run.
I can help,
but it's only Yeah,
No, no.
exactly. Yeah, well, I'll consult, but it's like it means what I don't know. I feel like I'm fortunate insofar as I'm inquisitive enough to want to look that up. Like the reason why something that you're doing is so crucial is it sticks up for the people who won't and arguably shouldn't have to do all the kind of, like you say, the DYOR. It's like it's all fine to say to somebody, you know, like, oh, you should do your own research, you should do your own research. It is one of those things that's easy said than done, because when the quality of the information outlets is so questionable, like you're talking about. Go on,
bro. I look. Long story short, if I have to send sorry, Tyler, a fucking white paper to my friends who are literal PhDs in mathematics, right, from fucking Rutgers or whatever, and they have to read the paper and they have to return to me. They return it back to me and say this is indiscernible. Then the average person has no chance. That's it. Simple as that.
Look, at the end of the day, the premise, not everybody can learn how to read Solidity. Not everybody is a computer scientist. You got people working 2 jobs, 14 hours a day, trying to get the kids to soccer practice.
Right.
They don't have time to do that. So, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't and won't participate in finance, and decentralized finance. So the premise from the outgo is broken. But let me just, if you want to get a little bit more annoyed, listen to this. Okay, listen to this, Ben. Listen, the whole DYOR thing was designed to get you, not to help you. So think about this, right? One of the things you are told is to one of the best practices before you buy a token is to look at the supply and to verify the holding and to verify that no more than 5% of the tokens are held by any individual wallet, right? Because otherwise that means that they're gonna, presumably, that there's someone who's gonna dump all the tokens on you. If you really unpack that, think about that. Yeah. So if you really unpack that, what would that mean? Well, that would mean that there's no treasury, because a treasury should have 30%, 40% of the tokens, right? So if there's no treasury, where are those tokens? Are they hidden? Oh, they're hidden. So what they mean is to say, invest in the projects where the team has gone through lengths to hide the token supply across dozens of other wallets so that no one wallet rises above a certain level. It's an insidious trick. Yes. So
yeah, it's very clever.
Very clever.
Yeah.
So is renouncing contract. If you think about it, why would you install Windows XP and never take a software update? Yeah. And Solidity and these blockchain technologies are.
But this is wild to me, because it's like somebody has hijacked the FAQs.
It doesn't.
And has pitched the FAQs in a way to your FAQs, what you would normally go to debunk, are now a lure.
Yeah. And this has always been this way. Locked liquidity. Why would you lock liquidity for 100 years? Why would you burn liquidity? That's, first of all, wasteful. And second of all, you couldn't pull it if there was a calamitous event. You couldn't pull it for a good reason. You couldn't partially draw down it to do market making if you're going to list on a centralized exchange. You're literally tying one arm behind your back with an automated market maker managing it, and you're saying, go ahead, bot. I'm sure you're going to do fine forever. I don't need to worry about anything. It's so that they can get your liquidity and not you. You're defenseless. Yeah.
Yep. They and those whom they deem worthy. So, okay, who's this guy who rug pulled you? What's his name?
Russ Davis.
I'm trying to look him up.
Russ Davis is he runs in Rust Retrust.
I don't mind calling him out.
Okay, fine. I don't either, because he's never going to sue me, because he doesn't want me to have discovery. He doesn't want me to have access to all of his books, right? So
come at us, Russ. That's what we're saying.
He runs at RustRetrustCrypto.com. If you go there, it's just a guru site. He says he's going to teach you all sorts of stuff about crypto, how to get rich. So he first of all has this like service for hundreds of bucks where he'll sell you courses. And then he has a Facebook group, which is just his ATM. So you go to it and you're supposed to get these like alpha calls, but he's just using them to farm them, right? He's giving out calls and then he's dumping. So he's front running them and dumping them. Yeah. So look, when I first joined DeFi, I wanted the get rich quick route. So I was like, oh, this Russ guy seems to know what he's doing. Because his real claim to fame was that he called SHIB very early. He made tens of millions of dollars through SHIB. which we won't go there. So the point is, that's his latest claim to fame. He literally won the Connecticut State Lottery. He literally won the lottery that's like set him up with his first bag. And then he won the lottery with Shib, and he's winning the lottery ever since. This dude just can't. He's fail. Is the definition of fail up. He cannot lose. It's so annoying.
Right. Right.
But yeah. He ran this group. I was part of this group. He was promoting this coin Emax, which is the Kim Kardashian Floyd Mayweather one. That was the one that rugged me. I was at the center of all of this from the beginning. I mean, I happened to be at the wrong place at the perfectly right time, and but it was a little bit of both because I was also networking with him. So it was also kind of a personal long con thing where I was getting friends with him. I thought he had connections that I'd be able to use and then take advantage of. I didn't know he was that like a scammer. I understood what he's doing with, which is basically a pump and dump, right? But I didn't think it was as bad. I thought, well, this is the network effect. This is Metcalfe's law. You buy into something you believe in, then you bring in people to support it, and then that's the whole point, is to front run other people, and now you're incentivized to grow it, right? You're sharing in the growth that you then help to make. That's actually that's the whole point of it. That's the encouraging part. But the idea is that you're adding value to the ecosystem, and you're not just like buying in super early for pennies and then dumping on them for millions, right? Like that's the difference. Is you're not doing that. So when used right, it's a very like altruistic thing. But when used wrong, it's bad. And I didn't realize he was doing it that way. I didn't know enough at the time to like understand these ledgers to see it. But before long, I mean, literally just over the course of like 4 or 5 weeks, I started to look at these records because in my head, I'm going, this price action doesn't make sense. I was an equities trader. So I'm looking at the price and I'm going, something's off. So I started looking at the ledgers and I got more suspicious. As my suspicions grow, I thought it might be him. And one thing led to another. And one day I confronted him, but it was too late. And my position was already sunk so far. I was like, well, I might as well not. I had this dilemma where I'm like, do I even bring it up or do I let him pump again so I can get out? Right. So like I had this spot where I was like, shit, like, but I have to do the right thing. I always do. So I just forfeited the bag basically, and just went to war. But I immediately saw this opportunity because then I started looking at all these other coins, all of his other coins, everyone else's coins, and I was like, oh man, this is like every coin basically is doing this. So like there's a huge addressable market.
A lot of them. How much of the market would you say is either susceptible, even just possibly, or I mean, either according to your system or according to your personal professional opinion, is susceptible to a rug pull or exhibits the characteristics of a possible rug pull?
85%.
Jesus Christ. There's no.
Yeah. So it's the amount of the market that is fraud is more than anybody realizes. The majority of the market is fraud, not 10%. So define fraud for us. So like, for example, in my mind at the moment, I'm just thinking of buying coins that don't exist, like the FTX thing, but I exchange dollars for a Bitcoin and that Bitcoin isn't actually real. What is that? The only kind of fraud? What other kinds of fraud are we talking? How many people, there's some statistic, some number, big number, I don't know what it is, X%, 70% of Americans don't even have $500 in savings to cover a big crisis, right? Some big event. Right. Yes. Just how many people have 80 ETH laying around to buy an ape picture? Not a lot of people. Right. Just how many people have an ETH, a $4,000 ETH, a single ETH? How many people have that to buy a CryptoPunk, Meebits, and insert NFT that's been over an ETH here? It's a fraction of a percent. People think that there's all these people that are participating in this, but it's mostly just the wealthy people. It's people who either got in crypto early and won the lottery, right? Got lucky, or it's the wealthy who are laundering money and scammers who are laundering money, who are keeping this volume going, who are manufacturing this volume, who are sweeping the floor to solidify it, which is just another way of saying market manipulation, who are, an enormous amount of what you think is like, and then there's a huge spectator audience that's participating on crypto Twitter and spaces, and that's not necessarily fraud, but that's keeping this machine going, and it's every now and again picking someone off who goes in, who goes in with their life savings, who goes in with some fractional share thing, and that's the game, and it's the majority of the market.
So okay, yeah, and these are things. This is why I like having these conversations with you, because you and I haven't known each other for very long, but we do think very similarly, which is interesting. You're a very smart guy, and I'm not saying this to, like, if Ben knows me well. I'm not that nice. So when I tell someone something, I really do mean it.
Appreciate it.
It's what bothers me, and I think we had this conversation the other day, is that the targets are the most, they seem to be the most desperate, kind of like the lottery, right? Like the targets are not middle class necessarily, although middle class people can get swept up in this stuff, right? The targets seem to be, especially in the current sort of macroeconomic conditions that are taking place in the United States, right, where people are sort of suffering and not able to make the sort of social climbs that they may have, their like parents may have been able to do.
Well, now think globally. Now think globally.
Well,
think about a third world. Think about an emerging market.
Go on. Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. So you take the most desperate in your own nation, right, and then you scale. You scale big time.
We celebrate that this is a global thing. We talk about how this decentralized finance is going to, we take advantage of the tendency for the West to want to virtue signal, and then we get them behind this idea that, this is going to be great for El Salvador. This is going to be great for Nigeria. This is the perfect time to get them in. They're going to have all this opportunity that they never had before. They're going to have access to economics they've never had access before by their governments. Hey, we're going to 1 million. WAGMI, get on board. And it was at exactly the wrong time, and it destroyed and devastated the poorest among us. The people who are least capable of sustaining that blow are the ones that priced in at the top. It's sick.
Yeah.
If they see a guy, with a blue check mark and a beard. If in this scenario, I'm the one promoting it, promoting something, he's got to know. What do they know? They barely know mathematics and arithmetic, right? They don't have that luxury, but they understand that they have access. They got a smartphone. They're able to connect. They're able to do. And now they have an opportunity to make to get their family out of a hut, out of the mud. They're going to take that shot because they think, from their point of view, that they have this unique, rare opportunity to follow a rich guy from America. But it's not going to be in their interest. It never was.
100%.
And then we blame them. Then we say, hey, you shouldn't have overextended. Hey, you shouldn't have invested more than you can afford. As if that even means anything to someone.
Right. What is it? Buyer beware. I forget the Latin. But yeah, that is the ultimate cruelty, right? Is we pretend as if they should have known better, and it's like, I guess, but to what extent can we assign personal responlegability? And
when we're baiting them, when we're literally baiting them, we're selling them the dream.
Yeah, that's called crime. Legally, right? I thought we called that crime, right? What is it called? Entrapment in some cases.
False advertising. It's insincere. It's definitely misleading.
Right. Maybe not
definitely insincere. Yeah.
Insincere is a generous way of putting it. So this is interesting to me, right? Because you brought something up that I think is really interesting, and is still it's still a problem that's persistent, and it's something that's affected you even in the past. And if you don't want to talk about this, we could move on from it. But I think what's fascinating is about a lot of this stuff is that the sort of virtue signaling still persists, which, from what I understand, is something that may have affected you in the past. If you want to get into that.
No, I'm
at all. I'm a
trailblazer. I'm a trendsetter, and that includes getting cancel culture. I was one of the first to get canceled. So, woo.
Yeah, you did it.
So
yeah, I can.
Look, at least it's to say nothing else about me. It's that I'm consistent. I'm one consistent motherfucker. I have consistent principles. I stick to them, and I'm not
Yes.
self-contradicting. This was the thing in 2014, which really got me good. But look, maybe I've got canceled double jeopardy, so I can talk about the things now, right? I can't get canceled twice. So I tried it.
And to be clear, I'm the one who invited him on here. To anyone who has
Yay!
any nonsense, I was the one. Exactly, you're saved. I brought him here. Come at me.
But I also like to think that our audience is the type where, if they're anything like us, like for example, if I see that somebody's been cancelled or if somebody's labelled controversial, the only thing I think is I'm probably going to be interested.
Yeah.
Like it's a knee-jerk reaction at this point.
If nothing else,
But yes,
right? It's not that they for sure did nothing wrong, but if nothing else, it's like there definitely has been an element of like hysteria and rush to judgment. So like this, you need to find out what part of the story wasn't told.
Well, it's also let me decide for myself. Right. That's the main thing. Like it's the because the controversial, that's the softened down word that gets used. Right. Because it used to be, it evolves and it changes, but controversial used to be problematic, used to be whatever, and all it means is we're trying to decide for you what you should think about this person ahead of time, and it just I'm not going to get on my soapbox.
I'll do it.
But get on it. Go on.
I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
How much? When I look back at myself when I was 18, and I look at the stuff I was reading, the ideas I had, I was barely a functioning human. Like I barely had a human brain. Right. Is my perspective now in my mid-30s, right? And that seems to be the consensus of everybody who gets to their mid-30s. Is you look back and you go, "Oh God, who the fuck was I?" And so then, why are our businesses and our brands capitulating to the ideas of 18-year-olds with pink hair and lip rings? I don't understand the logic of that when we know that they're wrong. We know they're barely smart. Like we know they're not smart. And so it's like, why then are we following?
We also know that they're going to grow up.
Exactly.
We also know that they're going to grow up. So like, for example, like just as an aside, so for example, I'm in the auto industry.
Yeah.
And like we keep talking about Gen Z, and we always come to the same conclusion. It seems like Gen Z aren't that interested in cars. Yeah, because they can't buy them yet. Like currently their relationship with a car is sitting in the back on their iPhone. Why are we adhering to people who don't have a vested interest? When I was a teenager, it was Ferrari, Lamborghini, or nothing, because I had no frame of reference for what that meant to get into that vehicle. Now, I'll take a decent used Volvo. Love me a decent used Volvo, because that's the frame of reference. But go on.
You don't understand, Mom. You just don't understand, Dad. You don't get it. You don't get me. It's like, they live once your age, stupid. Of course they do. Yeah, it's and I was there too. I'm not saying I'm above it. I was there too, and I was just as guilty.
No, of course. We all,
no,
everyone
absolutely.
In this discussion has
it's like, for example, I don't know if this is much of an international story. It was certainly big in Europe. Is the Finnish Prime Minister? Don't know if you heard about her. So she's a young world leader. She's 33, I think, 34. Yeah. And she had the audacity to go to a party. Yeah. And of course, photos have surfaced of her at this party. And it's just like, wow, we're not going to I can't help thinking, like, we're not going to have political cabinets in the future, because no one's going to run for office.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be so petrified of what people have got on their phones, what photos and videos and all the rest of it.
Well, either that
they're just going to be scared stiff.
Either that, or the only people qualified for that kind of a position are going to be people who lived a completely sheltered life, who took zero risks.
Like sterile.
Yeah. And is that the person who's going to be in touch with reality? I don't know.
Correct.
So yeah, like this was this is basically the problem. And so when I got canceled, I was like 23 or something like that, 24. I wasn't very old, or 25 maybe.
You were 24?
Yeah.
Wow.
You were 24?
Wow. Yeah.
I rewatched that interview, and you spoke very well. I rewatched so just for people listening. Josh was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it was episode 725. You did amazing.
Well, then I was 25 or 26. It was a year later.
It doesn't matter, bro. Like, you were thinking at a level that most people. This is what turned me on to you, is the fact that you were like expressing your ideas so well. How many mouth breathers do you know at 24, 25, or whatever you are? And here you are. Go on.
Sorry for cutting you off. Do you find that is because one of the things to me, because I literally listened to that episode today, so just as a small aside, it was number 719, but who's counting? So like listening to you on there, one of the things that I found is like when you make a concerted effort, and this is a question I wanted to ask you, Josh, is when you make a concerted effort to sort of tell the truth and go by your principles, it becomes much easier to speak effectively and speak clearly, because you're not trying to perform. You're just trying to articulate thought. So like, because something I wanted to ask you, Josh, is like, when you sent that original tweet about like, according to Baz, I can't just refer to him as the basketball guy because that's too vague. Whereas I feel like in the UK, that's perfectly specific enough. But like when you first put the tweet out about the basketball guy, about the, this bigot can say whatever he likes within his own home, within the privacy of his own home, was that you going, I don't give a shit what the response is going to be, I'm going to tweet this? Or was that you going like, I know this is, or were you shocked at the reaction? Were you doing it to be a contrarian, knowing it was going to get a reaction, or was it just you putting a thought out there into the ether?
Yeah, you're still looking at it from a perspective of what cancel culture is. It wasn't the thing back then, so I didn't go into it thinking that there was a huge risk in particular. Back then, the people who did the best were the people who brought a perspective that brought an interesting perspective. I was just like, what I wanted to do is I was angry because I saw a complete contradiction at a time when, like, it was right after the Ed Snowden stuff. It was right after, like, we were worried about our privacy, and it was like this is clearly like basically tantamount to prostitution. It's this young, like, 19-year-old, whatever, Instagram model who's like having an affair with this 86-year-old guy. She's not doing that for love. She's doing it because he's showering her with gifts from the marital estate. And she's having no remorse over this, right? She's having no conflict of conscience whatsoever. And we're heralding her as like a hero. And we're like applauding her for what she did when she actually did what I thought was a crime, or at very least like immoral, which is record you without your consent and trying to extort you and baiting you into a conversation, into an argument where you're probably going to say something offhand, which is exactly what he did.
Right.
That's what I heard when I listened to the conversation. I heard a relationship bait, on top of which was like an 86-year-old guy who, of course, has some racist shit in his head. Like, what 86-year-old guy doesn't?
Big surprise. An 86-year-old dude from the States at that time. What was it? 2015. So what was he?
When he was a kid, blacks literally couldn't use the same water fountains as whites. Literally.
Crazy. Yeah. So crazy. He has his ideas that are outdated. Yeah. That's so weird to me.
And so we decided to do the maximum punishment to him while like completely turning her into some like queen. And it's just like, how is this happening? So it was mostly just frustration that I tweeted it. And I didn't think that there was a ton of risk at all, honestly, because I also knew that I wasn't saying anything more. Like, I was like, he's a bigot, but fine. Like you can't do anything about it. And he's in his house. Like, but yeah, this is after all the Abu Ghraib stuff. This is after that we just gotten done with the whole like ends don't justify the means thing, and now we're like, oh, ends justify the means. So yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get the re-up. Yeah. Meat's back on the menu, boys.
Yeah, I thought it would be so obvious. I thought that the contradiction would be so clear that there was no risk, but it didn't matter at all.
Smart. It's obvious because you're smart, dude. that's your problem. Like, and I say that facetiously. No, I'm serious. And I'm like, that is because when I watched that interview, I was like, this is a man and if you were really fucking 24, 25, I was like, he's thought about these issues more than I had at his age. And the conclusions that he'd come to, I probably didn't reach until I was 30. And so that to me spoke so like, you're in some ways, you're kind of the canary in the coal mine in that regard. It's like, okay, we're treating someone who's thinking about this in a very critical way. Things are not going to be good. That's the thing. Whatever's coming is not going to be good.
That's the most painful part of it, I think, is just that no one like the because I also don't talk about it. It's not like I'm bragging. I'm not a braggart. So it's like, no,
you're great. That's you don't mention it.
The thing that people don't see is how much thought I put into these things before I say the things that I say. And then to be flippantly, it doesn't matter about the labeling and all this bad stuff that happens, but the idea that like this assumption that I don't know what I'm talking about, or that I'm just talking out of my ass. It's like, I promise you, I put in more thought than you, person reacting to me on Twitter. Right? Like, I promise you.
Yeah.
So it's more like it's very frustrating to have that mischaracterization. People like Jordan Peterson. I'm not going to say one side or the other, which side you land on him, but like that guy has put in a lot of thought into social issues.
Yeah,
a lot of thought.
Correct.
And you're not considering that when you just try to like paraphrase him or repackage or reframe his ideas yourself. It's like you're probably not getting it right because like. I tell you, this guy has put in a lot of thought, and it's just he's probably one of the most misunderstood people, the most misquoted people, most misrepresented people, because it's like, yeah, he says what he means. He's very specific in the way he speaks, and to extrapolate that in any direction at all is doing it an injustice.
It's not a misquote. It's not a misquote. I've resigned my.
It's the big thing for me is it's because when you say it's. Like I was looking up the difference the other day between the two new words that have entered our lexicon, been forced into our lexicon over the last 2 years, which is misinformation and disinformation. Because of course they're apparently slightly different, but they get used interchangeably. And it was like, and it's funny because when you talk about, I would almost say, because the dis, from what I understand, is deliberate. The idea that the D in disinformation is deliberate. It's deliberately misinforming. Yeah. And so like when you talk about somebody like Jordan Peterson, it's almost like he's almost, to take those two words, it's not even like he's misrepresented, he's disrepresented. Right. Because it's not, these people aren't trying to present a fair, they're not accidentally misinterpreting or unintentionally misinterpreting, they're intentionally misinterpreting. Like I was telling Baz off air, is like, I remember, and one of the reasons I'm talking about this, I suppose, is listening to your podcast. It was a great trip down memory lane of like what the world was like in 2015, like when all this stuff was just budding and burgeoning. Like I was telling Baz, I watched The Dictator the other day, 2012 film, and they have a joke in there about sensitivity training, and like I didn't even know that was a thing in 2012 because I was still at school. I didn't know this stuff has been around this long. And it was like, I remember discovering Jordan Peterson around about 2014, 2015. I was doing stand-up comedy. I go to a comedy festival. I'm chatting to my friends and I'm going, like, my comedian friends, and I'm going, have you heard of this Jordan Peterson guy? Because he's this new guy on the scene. I'm at university. He's a university professor. And I'm getting asked, like, oh, you don't listen to him, do you? Not that homophobe. And I'm there going, oh, God, I don't want to listen to a homophobe. What has he said? And this was my first exposure to it. Like, I'm not even 20 at that point, and I'm there going like, what? You must be able to give me an example. We have the internet. Why can't I just type in Jordan Peterson homophobic and find a video? But I can't. So what's happening? And it was such a bewildering time for everybody, but like for me, when I talk about it from a personal note, because it's like I didn't know how to process any of this. I didn't know, like, it's like, why would you say he's homophobic when he's not?
It's a really long,
or when you have no.
It's a really long game of telephone. That game where you have to like whisper to your friend, and they have to whisper to your friend, and by the end of it, how much has the secret changed? It's like that's what it kind of really is. Except instead of it being whispers, you're hitting the retweet button on Twitter, and by the time things get around, and you're quote tweeting it, and you're reframing it, and you're paraphrasing it, and you're reacting, and by the time it gets to the next person, by the time it gets to you, the idea has been gone through like 50,000 other brains and has been slightly tweaked and modified. It's no chance it's going to be representative of the original, and that's the problem.
But what's weird to me about all of this is that it's one, like, the targets we're picking are really strange to me. Like, you're a smart guy. You're working on a technology. You work on, by the way, one of my favorite games of all time. You're working on something that I think is a good thing for people. Jordan, you know, maybe you don't possess the same stature as him, Dr. Peterson, but it's also, you know, if you listen to him closely, I don't agree with everything that Jordan says, but it's hard to dislike the man if you listen to him.
I still lament that we have to say that in this today. I know you say that. I know you tell me that I sound like a jaded old man, but like I just lament that we have to say this. We have to go, oh, by the way, disclaimer.
That's part of it.
I don't agree with
a disgusting problem.
But the reason why I say it is because I literally, there are things I don't agree with Jordan on. But other than that, like, are these the people that are these like the proper targets? Are these the ones that we want? You know, is the thoughtful 25-year-old the one we want to do this to?
Look,
what are we to gain from that?
It's so infuriating because this goes back again to Ben's point, like what he was just saying. It's got to be emphasized. The fact that we even have to say, I don't disagree. I don't agree with everything he says. It's like there was a time in which it went without saying that you didn't agree with 100% of the person because you agreed with something they just said. There was a time where it didn't need to be said for real, but we've habituated this thing where it's like where we are on teams, and you either are 100% of the team or you're no percent of the team, and there's no gray area. So it's like it shouldn't have to be said, but it does have to be said. Otherwise, you run the risk of yourself being taken out of context or misinterpreted. And it's like we're putting the fault of other people to who are idiots. We're putting that fault, and like we're taking that onus on ourselves because we're surrounded by potential idiots who are going to think that because I like one thing he said that I like everything he said. It's so weird.
It's this whole point of like, unless you explicitly state it, you've implicitly said it. Like you've implied it.
It's backwards.
It's so. Well, what's bizarre to me is like for example, I remember it so vividly. Just like, why? What's your reasoning for saying that? And at the time, I'm there going like, I like these people. I'm doing stand up with these people. I don't want to think that. I don't think, and I still don't necessarily think that they're actively misrepresenting a guy. Maybe they just don't know, or they don't care to look it up. But it's like when you'll hear somebody say in a public discussion, like a Peterson or a Harris or a Weinstein or whoever, and it's like, wait, how does Harvey pronounce it? Because you have to say it the other way for Eric and Brett.
Weinstein?
So Weinstein. Okay, good. Yeah, I just know that you have to say it the other way. So yeah. But so like for those guys, it's like they'll say at the start of something, they'll go, generally speaking, X, and then the other person, the other side will go, well, what about this exception, and this exception? And I'm screaming at the screen, going like, that's implied when you're speaking generally, you fuckwit. the speaking generally acknowledges exceptions because you're speaking generally, and I'm not an academic. I'm not a lexicographer. I'm not any of this. I just understand. Even now, I'm doing it now. I'm putting my accolades or lack thereof out there as like don't take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a qualified accredited linguist. But no, I use the fucking language every day, so therefore I know that speaking generally allows for exceptions.
And Ben just animated. Ben just performed the exact meltdown we all have in our heads every time we hear this stuff. Every time we see it, that's what is going on in our head right there.
but it's deliberate, right? And that's the thing.
Oh,
Like
got so animated, I lost my headphones.
that's a lot for an Englishman. I've misplaced. I became so energized that my headphones were moved slightly. It's like, oh wow, this guy's furious. I think, and it's obviously deliberate, right? It's the same. Going back to the point where I said earlier, and to which Ben sort of elaborated on, it is not a misquote. A misquote is when you mishear something or miswrite something, and it's done out of genuine mistake. This is done out of malevolence. There's no way to I think to describe it as otherwise.
People edit things,
Like,
edit interviews to take it out of context. It's a trick. It's a tale as old as time, but it's like now it's being deployed at a scale and a frequency of social media. It's outrageous, and people and I don't know that people they're not like criminal masterminds coming up with this and like plotting and scheming it, but they're just sort of they're doing it, and they're causing massive amounts of damage, even if it is a little bit subliminal or subconscious. It's just it's become this habituated thing that we don't pay any attention to. We don't give any regard to. I don't want to go too far on the rabbit hole, but in large part because we've been watching Fox News do it for a decade, and we've been watching CNN do it for a decade, and it's like it just becomes normal, and it shouldn't have.
I love that you said that. Because I don't think most people realize that. I think people pick teams, and they don't realize that they're being played.
Where they learned it from? Monkey see, monkey do. Where did you learn it from? You learned it from these news sites you've been watching 24/7.
Well, this is what I think, but this is something that a lot of people go through as well, in particular when they make any kind of, I can't think of a better word than ideological, even though I personally would try, my life's goal is to try and avoid being sucked into another ideology. But like when you make any kind of like transition politically or whatever, like you become acutely aware of falling into the trap again. So like I've often described this to Baz as I was university left, and what I mean by that is I held a bunch of fashionable modern left-wing views or far left-wing views, but I didn't know why. I had just been given these platitudes and I had memorized them, and I would regurgitate them in order to win social points and sound like I was politically literate.
Right.
And it's like, and then you leave university and you go into the real world or whatever. But like there was some that I couldn't get on board with. There was some where it was like for me, and I sorry if we didn't want the conversation to go political, but anyway. For me, like the first one was white privilege. Like I was sitting there going, I was having that sort of leveled at me by somebody who I knew had far more privilege than me. And I was sitting there like, and I kept getting told that I had this white privilege, and I was there going, let me get my head around this. You're attributing something to me that's negative based on the color of my skin. I'm sure we have a word for that. I'm positive we have a word for that. and I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there for the first time in my life, going like, but I don't feel like I can say that word right now. Why don't I feel like I can say that word? It's a trap.
Right, it's definitely a trap. Yeah, the hook was being baited. You didn't bite. Good for you.
Yeah, and it's like, and then you start, and then like that's the first domino that goes, and then you start going like, what else have I been corralled into without questioning it? And then it almost makes you, it's almost like I remember years ago listening to Leah Remini on Joe Rogan talking about getting out of Scientology, and now she's worried about adhering to other religions because she doesn't, what if they're trying to trap her?
Right. So
and now I sit there and I have this same cynicism, this same skepticism. Right. Go on, Baz.
So the well's been poisoned is what you're is
right.
What
you're and you're there going,
or always had been.
What if you're just telling me, go on.
No, sorry.
No, it's like it's kind of like, although one of the things that it does lead you to do is it's leading to a great new wave of people coming through like you, and that's in the tech space. Even in like the entertainment space, we've got people like Shane Gillis, for example. Like, I love that bit that he does about Trump being the funniest president to see get shot, because that's something that both sides can laugh at, which is very, very tough to do. Like, that's a master at work how he's able to do that. And it's like I make the joke with Baz that one of the reasons that I know that Bitcoin is a good idea or crypto is a good idea is because both sides of the political aisle hate it. So that's your surefire, dead cert stamp of approval that this is probably going to be a good thing in the long run if they're both trying to shut it down. Like,
if Trump ever got
if
shot,
one
he'd just
side
deny
is,
it.
then okay,
He would just deny it. He wouldn't, and then he would just keep doing whatever he was doing.
My shooter's gay. no,
yeah.
My shooter's wife.
If you haven't seen that bit,
My
Josh will send it over. It's a great bit.
Yeah, shout out to Shane Gillis. Yeah, my shooter's wife, ugly as a dog. Yeah, that would be funny. Yeah, I mean, this is what kind of fascinates me about all this, and I'm curious to hear from you, Josh, because I've had nothing but great interactions with you. You and I met through Twitter Spaces, and immediately, as soon as I heard, it's funny. You behave a lot like me in that you switch modes. So you'll be in Josh, just I'm messing around, and my friends are really smart. But I'm going to make fart noises because it'll irritate them, and also it's very funny to anyone listening. Mostly me, definitely me, but I'm sure to other people as well. But then there's the other side of you, which we get a chance to see here in the podcast, where it's like, okay, this guy is not to be fucked with, right? This guy knows his stuff. So what's interesting to me. What I'd love to hear is what's your life kind of been since then. Since that whole kind of event happened, what did you do, man?
You just kind of try to recover from it, because it doesn't matter how you feel about it. It's gonna affect you negatively. Getting canceled. So and I was so early that it didn't.
Oh, by the way, real quick, Ben and I have both been canceled. I've been canceled 3 times actually. So 4th time, wow. I'm looking for my sandwich card. Yeah, so
Jeez.
Go for it. Sorry,
you're an overachiever. You're putting us all to shame.
Trying to make mom proud.
Real numbers here.
Yeah.
I'm a rookie.
Yeah.
So in my case, the problems didn't manifest until late. So initially, it was so ridiculous that I had plenty of companies just being like, "Oh man, that was a raw deal you got. So yeah, here, come work for us." But I ended up picking the wrong one, in the sense that they laid off the whole company 8 months later. So now I had 2 back-to-back short stints, on top of which still this bad thing in my background. So that really ended up.
Was this a developer company?
It was a company called
another video game.
Yeah, it was a company here in Georgia that I moved to Georgia for initially. So they just didn't have a very honest CEO. So that was what that came down to. But so hit some adversity and just laid everyone off, so he didn't lose his cushy $2 billion a year job, that kind of thing. So whatever, it is what it is. But that really hurt me in a way, because it's I just came off of this other thing. Really didn't need a bad little short stint on the resume. So that really made it hard to get another gig. So then from that point forward, I kind of had to keep taking step downs in terms of pay, getting paid less, having to sacrifice things, having to get rid of things, which just hurt myself, having to eat through savings. In between, I would always, after that, I would try to start my own company, because it's this is one thing I can control. But of course, starting a company costs a lot of money. You put a lot of your savings in, or all of it in my case, and then it usually doesn't work out, and it didn't. So then I had to go take another gig that was lower, and scrape myself back together, get some more money, try another gig. It didn't work. Lose all my money again. And so it's not an easy life, that's for sure. But you just do what you can. And the problem now is that there's a whole ecosystem around making hiring easier. So they have these AI populated profiling databases that hiring departments use. So if there's even a single red flag in your background, you'll be put into a category of red flags. So if there's any qualified candidates in the pipeline that are reasonably clear of that red flag, they're just going to get the job before you. They'll get the interview before you. And so it really has a lasting effect. But it doesn't affect me anymore if I'm in DeFi land, right? Just building my own protocols.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that.
The other thing is, I think now you have enough, your name has enough weight, like it was, because your cancellation case, if that's a phrase, is kind of akin to James Damore in a way, where it's like, it was just a guy who expressed an opinion. This wasn't a person, this wasn't a public figure, this wasn't somebody holding public office or should have been under the eye of public scrutiny, and yet all of a sudden they were. Whereas now it's you, people who need to know who Josh Olin is, and so that, I don't know, it kind of makes you immune from it again, doesn't it?
Well, it's funny. Also, back then, that was potentially seen as like actually a big deal because there's so few examples of canceling back then. But like today, the standard of like that, if that had all happened exactly the same way today, nothing would have happened. Like nothing would have happened.
Yes.
It's another point of like how there's just sort of this perspective that's lacking around the whole thing, the whole activity. Because you'd think that like objectively, if you thought I did something that deserved the punishment that I've endured, then it should be the same no matter when it happened, right? But no, it's not.
Right.
Interesting.
No, I've literally, when I graduated, I remember putting into Google, this is God's honest truth, jobs for people who aren't woke. So I was trying to find somewhere where, like, because even in my job at the moment, like I can't be this candid. I can't be this candid, and it pisses me off to no end.
But you know what the tragedy of all this is going back to your point, Ben, on poisoning the well. There are good ideas, right, out there in some of these ideologies, right? But now we can't even, especially like, I don't know about your experience, Josh, but I can guess my experience when I was canceled was the single most painful thing that's ever happened to me probably in my whole life. And if it wasn't for, the steps I sort of took to rehabilitate myself, I would have lost sight of the positives, I think, in some of these sort of people's viewpoints, right? There are certain things, like you were alluding to earlier, where it's like, yeah, maybe you should consider this, things from a certain perspective, or like, hey, within this particular context, maybe this context only, yes, a woman definitely possesses a disadvantage, right? It's just unfortunate that it's been, what is it? I don't know. There's something about virtualization that brings out a sociopathic dark triad behavior and just ruins everything for everybody, I feel like.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I don't know if there's been a rise, like if there's been an increase in it, or if it's because we have so much more access to to people and ideas. But it seems like there's been a rise of that behavioral and that trait expressing itself, hasn't it?
Well, actually, it's interesting. There's studies on that have been done on this, and it depends on whom. I'm very fascinated with dark triad behavior and narcissism, specifically narcissistic personality disorder. I came from a household where someone did suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, and so it's a deep interest of mine, and it's really interesting, sort of observing the sort of changes in narcissism amongst recent generations. It's skyrocketed, interestingly enough, in women. A lot of researchers have varying numbers on this. Some counter arguments you might hear on this is that, well, people weren't paying attention to the sort of mental behaviors of women, but there's only so much you can account for that, right? There's only so much you can account for not noticing sociopathy or dark triadism simply because someone is a woman, especially at the rates that some of these researchers describe it, which is in upwards of a 20 to 25% change, right? And not necessarily narcissistic personality disorders, but behaviors that border on the narcissist, on NPD, that touch NPD, right? So not quite NPD, but man, you're getting close, and that's fascinating to me. And there's a core. And Jonathan Haidt, I don't know if you've heard of it, Jonathan Haidt, but he's a great writer. Wrote the Coddling of the American Mind. Has been commenting a lot on this recently, on this correlation between virtualization and social media and the rise of narcissism and sort of dark triad behaviors. And obviously correlation doesn't mean causation, but the fact that when you look at the graph, that it looks so close, like it's almost lockstep. It's frightening, man.
Makes you wonder.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Can't not ask yourself, huh?
Well, it's like if we're tiered, let's do some real bro armchair psychology for a second. Like, surely some of it comes from the fact that you're the main character in your own story.
Sure.
Like, you get to enact whatever you want to be. You can cultivate a persona online. You're free from consequence online. I don't know, because it's like, I remember my late grandfather asking me about dating through apps, because he was like, "Oh, surely that means that you don't. There's no price to pay. Like, you don't have to get rejected. Right. You don't have to worry about getting rejected." And I was like, "Oh, well, you do if you want to meet somebody, though, Grandpa. Like, if you want to go out in the world and actually meet a woman, you still will face that rejection. It's just perusing the bar is now swiping left or right on an app." Like, and then, but he did raise a good point inadvertently, which is, if you choose to only spend time on the app accumulating those matches like Pokemon cards, then yes, you can reside in this world of, oh, well, I've got this many humans who think I'm attractive, so I can.
You're getting the dopamine hit.
Almost,
you're getting a little hit of dopamine.
I can internally have this cosplay of like, oh, look, I'm Casanova, when I don't have to materialize that or manifest that in the real world. And that sounds like an absolute breeding ground for narcissism. So it's definitely like the freedom from consequence has to be a player. Like, surely, like, you know, you read into studies on trolling and the difference versus what people say online and the aggression of what they say online versus what they say in person. And that's because in person it's a fist coming at your face, and online it's an emoji in front of your face. Like that. That's a stark contrast for the ordinary mind to deal with.
Well, so it's also like,
it's like it's funny.
Well, so analogy that I use is, or the example I use is like when a young girl in school gets her heart broken for the first time, right? Has a boy break up with her. Before, or when I got done for the first time, you learn how to deal with that by relying on people. You rely on your family, your friends, or you just internalize it, whatever. What you don't do is you don't run to the liquor cabinet and start downing liquor, because that's how alcoholics are born, and that's the way that you get your dopamine rush, right? And you feel better. Well, nowadays what's happening is, girl gets broken up with, gets her heart broken. What she does is, and I know this because I saw my little sister do this, runs up to her room after school and takes a bunch of selfies and filters it and finds the perfect one and uploads it to Instagram, and then refreshes the feed of beautiful smile, sexy baby, hot, oh, look how good you look. She showers herself with dopamine instead of learning how to cope. Well, this is copamine. This is changing something about the development of that person.
As a hashtag,
that's copamine.
That's a great one. Copamine. That's so good. Like, it's because it's true, right? Because interestingly, right? Maybe this is something to bring up now, purely because I've listened to your 7-year-old podcast so recently. Is one of the things that you and Joe discussed. Do I get to call him Joe, or do I have to call him like Mr. Rogan?
You're on first name basis by proxy through me. You're good. You've inherited.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
I'll Mr. Rogan. Good day to you, sir.
You are so violent.
When
you are
when you're on
English, dude. You are so just earth-shatteringly just
but
You are so British.
when you were on the Joe Rogan Experience, you spoke about you were pondering whether is this the greatest time to greatest generation to be observant of the transition of leaning into tech in terms of from a social point of view. And it was like, because I almost wonder that as well. So I'm born in the mid 90s, right? So I grew up at the back end of MSN, let's say, like MSN Messenger. I had it for a little bit, but it was already sort of falling away. Never had MySpace. For me, it was the first one for me was Facebook. And it's like, and then I didn't have Instagram until I was in university. And that just seems, that's not because I didn't necessarily want it, it's because I wasn't aware of it until I was 18. And I sit there now and I wonder, like, because you even mentioned it on that episode about you've got nephews, nieces, kids in your world who come in from school and jump on an iPad and sit on the couch and they're sat there on their iPad. And it's almost like this pacifier that goes beyond you. This isn't something you've said, but like I almost see it as like it's like this pacifier that goes beyond infancy. It's like this ever present pacifier. I'm stunned to hear when you talk about your younger sister using it as it's her immediate way of getting out. Like when my first girlfriend broke up with me, I listened to the Smiths and drove home crying. I didn't.
You figure they worked that shit out in your head.
I didn't have it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Morrissey lyrics made it worse, way worse, but eventually better. But then I didn't. Yeah, you don't think to lean into, but it's crazy to talk about that because I even remember now, like when I first got on MSN as a preteen, like I'm there on MSN Messenger, like. And my friends who've had it for a month or 2 months already, the novelty's already falling away. And I'm begging them to come online because I want to experience it being online. And they're bored of it already. And then now we've got TikTok. And I'm sitting there going, I'm already terrified of TikTok. Not even 30. And I'm terrified of a social media platform. Like, and I'm sitting there going, I want my kids who don't even exist yet to stay away from this. And I don't even have the jurisdiction over these non-existent humans to be able to tell them that. And yet I'm petrified.
You can't, sorry, you can't, I was reaching for the mute button, but I couldn't get there in time. You can't tell me that this isn't, for better or worse, right? Maybe it's better, but you can't tell me that it's not different, that it's not changing the rules, that changing the way that we're growing up, and perhaps it's creating problems that we should be aware of and looking at, not just looking back on 50 years from now going, oh, that was probably stupid. Let's get out ahead of it.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Like it speaks to the pathology of the times we're in, where it's like, it's not tolerance any longer of the nascent. It's forceful acceptance. You must accept it. So it's like when we see like it's so crazy to me, like looking at how TikTok, social media platforms, they're now the go-to for, it seems like, counseling and medical advice. Because it's famously documented about the whole thing on TikTok with people recording their symptoms of various psychological disorders that may or may not even be diagnosed. And they will, like the one that went around recently of multiple personality disorder, but straight out of the movie Split, like where they talk about, and you've got these kids referring to themselves as the system, and they have all these different personalities that get to share the system, and they'll switch on camera in front of TikTok. But these are viewed tens of millions of times. And this speaks to your point, is like, maybe the jury's out over whether this is good or bad, because who knows the positives that can come from it as well as the negatives. But yes, right, please don't pull the wool over my eyes and try and tell me that this isn't very different from where we've come from.
If you want to learn more about Josh, check him out on his social media, which you can find right here. And if you want to learn more about his amazing crypto project, Rug Pull, go to rugpull.org. And if you enjoyed this podcast, check out any one of these other podcasts we filmed. Thanks, guys.